right. Well, Natalie, thank you so much for being here today and talking to us about Every Kid Sports. I wanted to just start from the beginning for those of the listeners that may have never heard of Every Kid Sports. Who are you guys and what do you guys do?
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be talking with you today. And Every Kid Sports, our mission really is to help every kid who wants to play sports get the opportunity to play sports. And we do that by covering the registration fee. So our little short mission is we pay, kids play. And so we cover up to $150 of sports registration fees. We really focus on recreational sports, so not so much getting kids into those competitive programs, but really getting them into recreational sport programs, and that includes middle school sports and high school sports, covering the pay to play fees, and we're just trying to level the paying field of playing youth sports. So it's a tongue twister, but yeah, just trying to really create more access. Currently, 38% of kids are playing youth sports, which means that 62% of kids are not playing. And
Yeah.
the reason that they're not playing is they can't afford it.
hmm Yeah, I think that's probably a misconception that people think like, well, of course kids are playing sports. It's, all kids play sports. It's just what you do when you're younger and you just go play soccer or you're on the local, softball team or whatever it is. Can you talk about maybe some of the misconceptions you mentioned, like 38%, which seems to me so low? Because again, I came from a community where everybody played sports as a kid. It wasn't like a question. So maybe talking about some of those misconceptions of youth
Yeah.
sports.
Well, there's a couple. One is, that so few kids are playing. You get into these pockets. Like I live in a community where a lot of kids play youth sports. So when I mention that here locally, people just are like, no. But what's happening is it's the low income kids that are really being squeezed out. And especially when you look at what's happening in the US with competitive sports, that's kind of been our model that we've been going to, is this super competitive youth sports. And what happens in that model is that even makes it harder for low income families. And the problem gets magnified because when everybody who can afford to go into a competitive program goes into a competitive program, the recreational programs end up not having enough kids registering for them. And especially in low income areas, they kind of have to rely on this blend of the kids that can afford, the families that can afford it, and the low income kids. But when you take the kids that can afford it out, all of a sudden you're left with a lot of kids that need scholarships, and those leagues end up folding. And so it really is a huge issue. The other thing that happens with this super competitive and model, and one of the biggest misconceptions, is parents in particular, think that they're really doing something great for their kids by getting them into these competitive programs. But really, the research is overwhelmingly shows that those competitive programs, especially for kids who are like under 15 years of age, are really not benefiting the child.
Mm-hmm.
And because there's overuse injuries, the burnout is higher. And the parents that I talk to that have their kids in those programs are like, yeah, but they're learning all these great skills. And it's true. If you took a kid who was playing in a competitive program and a kid playing in a rec program, and you put them head to head at age 9, 10, 11, 12, the kid who's in the competitive program is going to outperform that child at that time. But if you looked at them when they were 17, 18 years old, the kid who was a multi-sport athlete and played a lot of different sports will actually outperform the kid who played that single sport all the way through. And so it's such a hard thing for parents that can afford to get their kids in those programs because they really think they're doing the best thing for their kid by
Sure.
getting them in there, but they're really not. And so we kind of have three pillars. We believe in multi-sport athletes and growing multi-sport athletes. And when they're younger, we encourage them to do sport sampling. So going from sport to sport to sport to sport. The other pillar that we believe in is kid choice, that it really should come from what the kid wants to play, not necessarily what's maybe what their family can afford or what's available to them for free in their neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And, a lot of times the kids that are low income kids, they don't want to play the free program. They want to play the program that all their other friends at school are playing. And so we really try and make that happen for them. And then the other pillar is just access, getting more kids playing sports.
Yeah, I thought you brought up some really good points that, again, even working in the sports industry itself, a lot of people, I guess, don't think about is there really isn't an equity at a youth level of who gets access to play, really. I mean, that's really what it is, again, like you said, there's bubbles where everybody plays youth sports and it's just like the thing to do because, they probably have the money to pay some of these fees and they just have great local recreational programs. And so I think you highlighted a really good point about that youth sports isn't as equitable as we might imagine that it is. And so there's a lot of work we can do to fix that. So can you take us back to kind of the beginning of Every Kid Sports? I know it used to be Kids in the Game before you guys rebranded a little bit, but why did you decide to start this organization? Like what happened in your life, or how did you come about this, realization and figured you had to do something about this?
Yeah, so I grew up as an athlete. I played multiple sports. I had 9 letters in high school, and I went on to play volleyball in college. And sports was what defined me. I mean, most of the people who knew me as a kid was like, "Oh yeah, Natalie, she was an athlete," and that was just was so proud of that, and was like all through my adult life, I've played sports and I'm just a competitor. It's just what I love to do. And when I heard that 38% of kids were playing and that was it, and that 70% of them were dropping out by the time they were 13, I was just like, oh my gosh, we've got to do something. And we started Kids in the Game. There was 4 of us that started it, and all together we were just like, yeah, we got to do. What can we do? And we tried a lot of different models of increasing access and getting more kids in the game and playing. And really, what we came up with our past program was really just it's a model that we feel really reaches those families by just covering up to $150. All they have to do is apply online. They can apply in the privacy of their own home or on their phone or sitting in their car, waiting to pick their kids up from school. So they don't have to go in and ask somebody, hey, can I get a scholarship, or I can't afford this, which for some families, that takes a lot of courage to go in and say, hey, I need help. And so we're really proud of our model of having it be discreet, and all they have to do is provide some type of proof that they qualify for some other type of government assistance. So it could be free and reduced lunch letter from the school. It could be they show their qualification for food stamps, which is SNAP now, or for WIC, or there's a whole host of things that we take. And so so that's kind of how we got started. It was really that statistic that just stood out to us, all of us growing up playing sports, going, oh my gosh, there's that many kids that are being left out.
Yeah. And I think one question that I'm sure you guys might get asked if you're looking for either donations or support is why sports? Like why do we need kids to get involved with sports? Like when you say that statistic shocked you, like what is so important about young people playing sports that, your organization makes a difference in getting them?
Yeah, I mean, the research about sports is just overwhelming as far as, kids who play sports and are active do better in school. They do better in life. The chance of incarceration, drug use, teen pregnancy, belonging to a gang, those all decrease when kids are involved in sports. And I think one of the things that's probably one of the most important things about sports and just physical activity and being active is the mental health. You can really see the kids that aren't getting any physical activity, their depression rates and their anxiety rates are much higher than kids that are getting regular physical activity. And by being involved in sports, it's like a forced system of where you're getting that physical activity, but you're also getting connection. These kids are really getting that connection. They're getting connection with another adult in their life, but also the connection with their teammates and being part of a larger family than just whatever's going on in their own home. And so those are some of the key reasons, but it's just so good for kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think this year especially, there's been a lot of changes. So have you guys had to, you know, build or create extra support given the fact that, sports wasn't able to be played from a, global perspective this year from a health concern reason? And how did you guys decide to shift focus this summer and going into this virtual school year for a lot of people?
Yeah. So a couple different things. So one thing is we have really been working on um, uh, co- really fundraising and raising a lot more money, because when sports comes back, uh, global or around the whole country, there are pockets right now where sports are being played. Um, I have a lot of concerns about the winter sports. I think right now there's a lot of sports that are being played that are outside, which are a lot easier for families, to participate in. But as we get into the winter months and things start playing like, basketball and things that are inside of a gym, I have, greater concerns about whether we're going to be able to sustain that. So we've really been trying to raise funding to be able to take our past program nationally and help, 100,000 kids.
Yeah.
If you look at what's happening in youth sports, a lot of the little small mom and pop youth sports organizations, they rely on every registration that comes in. And a lot of them are not set up to sustain, losing a season
Yeah.
and having their, and if you think of like a gymnastics academy or a martial arts studio, they're paying rent on that building, and they need those kids and those families coming in regularly to participate in their programs for them to pay their rent and keep the lights on. And
Mhm.
so we have seen across the board, across the entire country, thousands of youth sports organizations close their doors, and they're really going to have a hard time reopening their doors without some support. And that's where we're really hoping to be able to come in, because if we can kickstart registrations and get a lot of people registering for those programs, hopefully that will allow them to open their doors again. And there's probably going to have to be other support out there to help as well. But if we can get a lot of those kids, and the thing that's interesting about the pandemic is I think families that kind of had their kids in sports but didn't really know how much benefit their kids were getting from it. All of a sudden there's this new narrative about, oh my gosh, this really does make a difference in my kid's life. Like my child is not as happy, they're not doing as well, they miss their friends, they're not having fun, and there's health consequences from that too. I mean,
Yeah.
one of the best things people can do to fight the pandemic is to get exercise, and when we're trapped inside, it's so much harder, to do that. So
I know me personally, I've never missed being able to go to an actual gym and work out and not worry about, who's around me and how close I am and all that kind of stuff. I never liked going to the gym, and now I'm like, oh, I just want to go to the gym. So I'm sure
I
for
know.
kids, I'm sure for kids it's the same as like, they may have complained about having to run at practice or something, but now I bet they're like, God, I just wish we could go to practice, make me run suicides. I don't care, whatever it is. Um,
Yeah.
I think that's definitely good point about just like recognizing the value of sport in your life, and just having that team and that mental health and just fitness aspect to your life is super important. So,
Yeah.
well, here at Tackle What's Next, we really help athletes transition out of sports. And so, one of the things that we've talked a lot about is your Champions program and some of the work that you guys do with athletes at higher levels of sport to work with youth sports and really help complete and achieve your mission of getting kids access to sports at young ages. So, tell us a little bit about that, and maybe why is it important for you guys to work with these higher level athletes and bring them into the fold of what you guys are doing?
Yeah, for sure. So, it's going to take a village to really bring back youth sports and to really help all these kids. And when you think about the pandemic, there prior to the pandemic, there was 2.5 million kids who were interested in playing sports but didn't have access to sports. And 77% of that 2.5 million are Black and brown kids.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that was pre-pandemic. So if you can imagine post-pandemic, that number is going to be even larger because of those are the families that are being most impacted, and it's the people who are the lower income families, and so by bringing, so when I say it takes a village, is we can't do this on our own. We need other people joining our cause and really helping us get the word out. Not only getting the word out from a fundraising perspective and helping us raise the funding that we need to be able to support 100,000 kids, but once we have that funding, we need those champions to also help get the word out to those low income communities that this is a resource that they can use to get their kid back in the game. And, we're a small organization, and we're, building our reputation out there, but there's nothing as powerful as somebody who is somebody that a child would look up to, that, either played sports in college or at a professional level, and knows the value of sport, to be able to talk to those kids and say, hey, you can do this too. And even if they're 13 years old and they've never played a sport, it's not too late for them to join something. And there's a sport for everyone. We're not just a ball sport. I mean, we've actually paid for marching band, because that's physical activity. And and there's all kinds of things. There's horseback riding, and there's all kinds of different sports sampling camps, and just different programs that kids can get into that would just help them tap into that inner athlete. And I really believe that everybody has an inner athlete, and so it's really about tapping into that. And there's just no better way than having an athlete share that message.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's so important to hear from those that you might look up to, but also those that have been in your shoes, and for
Yes.
parents especially, to hear from some people that, have made it, fairly far down the road of being an athlete, and really sharing the positives and why it's important and why they should get their kids involved, and help them stay involved. And I love the emphasis on sports sampling. It's almost like when you are a kid, you don't necessarily know what you like. You haven't tried everything. You haven't had, years of experience to say, oh, I know I don't like horseback riding, not a fan. You have no idea. So I love the idea of like encouraging people to play different sports, to try something. And if they don't like it after they try it, sure, try something else, and continue to have that kind of well-rounded sports background. And I think hopefully at the youth level, that also sticks with them throughout life, because I really do think, even as athletes transition out of sports, you have to have an open mind, and you have to kind of, sure, what you don't want to do, but you got to try stuff, and you can't be afraid to do something different, or try something new that maybe you haven't done before. So I think that's a really good message for kids too, that athletes can share. Is like, look, I'm doing something new as well. I'm playing at this school, or I'm taking this class in school, and it's new, but I got to try it. So I love
Well,
that.
and
That
yeah, and as you age, it's like, I used to play competitive volleyball. I can't play volleyball the way I used to play volleyball. And so you have to find what works, for your body as well as you get older. And if you've played a whole bunch of sports, then it's so much easier to pick up those other sports, or to go to something else that you've played before that maybe is a little bit easier on your body. And so
yeah, so
it's, yeah,
true. Yeah,
yeah.
it's such a good point. So, and if listeners are kind of taking something away from the work that you do, what do you want them to take away? What do you want them to, share with their family members at the dinner table about, what they heard in this podcast today?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is that sports is for everyone. That there is a sport, there is a physical activity that matches up, that every kid can do. You don't have to be like, one of the things that happens with this competitive model. My daughter is an amazing artist and an amazing musician, and she's not a great athlete, but she has found sports that she can do that work for her body and work for what she likes to do, but keeps her fit. And
Mm-hmm.
so I do believe that there's a sport for every kid. But when you have the super competitive model, kids like my daughter, all of a sudden, that they're like, well, that's not me. I'm not like this. I don't want to play competitive. But there's nothing, at a certain age, all that's available is competitive, because everybody's going towards that model. And so I'd really love to see the way more rec programs, intramural programs, things where kids can just stay active. And so I guess the biggest thing is that sports is for everyone, that every kid should get the opportunity to play. They don't have to be an athlete. They don't have to be naturally talented athletically. It's not about them getting a college scholarship. It's not about them playing, college sports. It's about them learning how to be an athlete in their own way, in their own terms, and learning how to stay athletic throughout their whole life, so that they can learn those life lessons and that can carry them on. And that every kid should get that chance, and money shouldn't be the barrier.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that sport is for everyone is such a great just like tagline for someone to take and just run with in their life. And I also love that you mentioned it's important to have these, athletic skill sets, and just understand, what it's like to go to practice, what it's like to learn about teamwork and criticism from a coach and all of these things. Like they translate well beyond sports and into life. And like you said, it's a lot easier to learn how to, work out 5 times a week or 4 times a week when you're a kid than it is to pick it up, in your late 20s, early 30s and say, oh, I'm just going to start working out, 4 times a week. It's a big life change. And so getting into those healthy habits as a young person and having something physical for them to do is really, really important. So that's great. And you kind of touched on this a little bit, but if we're 10 years from now, you're looking back, what do you really hope that Every Kid Sports has done in that decade of time? Like, where do you see Every Kid Sports, accomplishing in the next 10 years?
Yeah. So, I mean, my big goal is to help 1 million kids get in the game. And so, the average cost of youth sports is around $90. And a lot of people go, oh, $90, really? I mean, we pay $40. Well, there's a lot of sports that are at the younger age that are $20, $30, $40. But you think about high school sports and, like playing football is $300 here locally. And it's even going to be higher now post-pandemic because like busing, for example, our football team has to take 3 buses to go to any of the games to have the correct social distancing in the bus, and so you go from 1 bus to 3 buses, all of a sudden the cost to play is going to, is going to go up. Mm-hmm. And so, if you think $90, 1 million kids, that's $90 million. And, but that's what is in my heart is to, and to really change the sports culture in America, to get away from the super competitive, pick one sport when you're 9 years old, play that throughout your whole childhood. I'd really like to get back to multi-sport athletes. If you look in the pros, like pro football, almost every single athlete didn't play football until maybe high school, some of them even college. Yeah. And a lot of them were multi-sport, almost all of them were multi-sport athletes.
Yeah.
And it's really about building your athleticism. And so those are my 2 big goals, is get 1 million kids and hopefully over time change the sports culture in our country.
Yeah, I love that. I totally agree in terms of the sports culture too. I would love to see a shift in that, because not only does it hurt the athletes that are specializing at a young age, they get burnt out, they might injure themselves, but it also kind of sets them back in life, because once they leave their sport, maybe they don't make it college or pro, they haven't really dabbled in other things and know what else they like. And so I agree. It's really important to get them, kind of well-rounded opportunities and experiences, so that if football doesn't work out, let's just use that as an example, they're like, well, I have these other sports that keep me active, and I was in, music club, or I was in, Spanish club, and I have these other things that I was able to spend my time doing, and I can, I don't fall back into nothing. And so I think that's the goal, right? So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. And a couple more questions before I let you go.
Yeah.
What does being a philanthropist mean to you? You have a nonprofit. Like, what does the word philanthropist mean to you?
Yeah, when I think of philanthropy, it's really about giving back, and it's about helping somebody who's less fortunate than yourself. And so, and it can show up in so many different ways. And I mean, I've been so blessed with this nonprofit, like the number of kids that have stepped up and done amazing things on our behalf, and have really showed me what it means to be a philanthropist. It's like I've started this, and I started off, being a volunteer, and I've eventually worked into being a paid executive director. But it was, it's, to me, it's giving a little piece of yourself. And so, it's easy for people to give money. It's a lot harder when you give a piece of yourself. And even with the, money, it's when you give money and it means that you don't get to go get a cup of coffee, or it means that you don't get to do something, to me, that means more than somebody who has the excess and is just giving you what wouldn't hurt them, Mm-hmm. And so that's what I see with we've had an 8-year-old boy not have any birthday presents, and all of his birthday presents were donations to our nonprofit at 8.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. We've had a 13-year-old girl who started a race in San Diego to raise money for us. Mm-hmm. And has worked tirelessly for the last 4 years, raising money, doing a race every year. And, just amazing stories of grace and giving back, and really giving something up to help somebody else, which is really amazing.
I love that. I think it's so true. And you hit the nail on the head when you said there's a lot of ways to give back. It's not always about, donating all of your money or making huge, large donations. It's sometimes that valuable, $10 that you were gonna, like you said, go treat yourself to something. And you said, you know what, this is a better cause for that money, or it's your time. Right. So I think that's a great example of philanthropy, especially with those young kids. It's really inspirational. And hopefully people take that example and use that as giving a piece of yourself. I really like that as a nice way to think about philanthropy. Um, and so Natalie, as a former athlete at the collegiate level, what advice do you have for athletes that want to either get involved with something in the community, to speak out for a cause, to create a nonprofit? Like what advice do you have to them about where they start, where they start and how they can coalesce all their platform efforts and competitive spirit in a different direction?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing is you really have to follow your heart. It has to be something that you really believe in and where you want to make a difference. The other thing I'd say is it doesn't have to be your own invention. A lot of times I talk to so many athletes who want to do their own thing, and that's fine. I mean, I'm not discouraging you from doing that, but there's a lot of amazing organizations out there, and you can put your weight behind somebody who already exists. Your impact can be even greater than just doing something on your own. It's kind of like, do you want a slice of the watermelon or do you want to eat a grape? You can have the whole grape, but you can have just a slice of the watermelon. And if you have a slice of the watermelon, you get a lot more food. And I think of that. I use that example a lot with different people that I come in contact with, and not that I want everybody to join what we're doing, but if we get a lot of people helping us, gosh, think of the impact that we could have. I can't do this on my own. And so I would just really look and go, what really speaks to you? And is there somebody already doing that? And if not, then yes, if that's really what speaks to you, start your own thing. But don't rely on the fact that it has to be just you doing it. Like, you joining somebody else that's already doing some great work could really be beneficial, because you're using your gifts to help, and a lot of times running a whole nonprofit, like, I mean, I've learned so much doing this, but a lot of the skills I didn't have. I've had to rely on other people to help me get here. And so we all don't have to be starting from scratch, I guess is.
Yeah, it's like why recreate the wheel, and like you said, think about how much further their platform and their efforts could go if they don't have to do all the grunt work and the hard work that you guys have already put the time and effort into, and they can come in, like you said, and get that. I like that grape versus watermelon analogy. I'm gonna have to use that, but it's like that slice versus the whole grape. It's you got to think about what you want to do. But I love that. Just why recreate the wheel and put your efforts where there's already a plan in place that can make an impact. So that's great advice for anyone listening in that's thinking about what they want to do and how they want to leave their impact. So
Yes.
Natalie, thank you so much. This was a great conversation. And I just want to give you a chance before we sign off here, just to let us know, whether they're athletes or not, how can they get involved with Every Kid Sports, and where can they find you, either donate, follow along, send people your way?
Yeah. So we're on, all the platforms. And you can see us on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn, we're on Twitter. And our website is everykidsports.org. We would love to engage with people. If you send an email to info@everykidsports.org, we will get you to the right person, depending upon whether you want to become a champion for us, whether you want to, do an event. We are going to be launching some peer-to-peer fundraising. So if somebody wants to run a race and, raise money for us, or, a birthday or whatever, we'll have that up on our website as well. We'd love to hear from people, and it takes a village. So we need more people helping us to raise the funding and then get the word out about our programming. So
yeah, it certainly does take a village. And Natalie, thank you so much for being here today, for sharing your mission at Every Kid Sports and your story of why you and your fellow founders decided this was an important mission. And thank you for all the work you're doing. Really, as someone that works with athletes, on the flip side, as they're kind of leaving the sports world, sports is really a big determination of their character and some of the life lessons they learn. And, you know, we talk to a lot of athletes about some of the things that sports has taught them, and it's real valuable life skills that they can use going forward. So you guys are really making a big impact, and you're, you know, 1 million kids playing sports is a huge goal. But like you said, you know, with some help and getting the village together, I think you guys can definitely achieve it. So thank you for being here. We'll throw everything linked up in the show notes to your social media and your website. And again, thanks for taking the time to join the Big League Philanthropist podcast. It was great to have
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.